Hello and welcome to the Championship Lap, your weekly F1 podcast reviewing the latest races and looking ahead to the next in the racing calendar. I'm joined here today, as always, by Megan. We've also got Mila and Tom. Firstly, guys, how are you all doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Great,
Excited
thank
to talk
you.
about the race.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought we'd start with just quickly talking about the sprint. I was going to do a Jason Cundy, which might be a bit of a niche reference. Tom might get that reference, but if you watch Talksport quite regularly, but basically there were encouraging signs for McLaren in the sprint. There was a 1-2 finish. Firstly, Megan, what did you make to McLaren having a little bit of a better start to their race weekend? We'll get onto the race itself later, but yeah, just the sprint firstly.
Well, I think that first of all, after 5 weeks, it's quite encouraging because it's the first time you're back in the car after a very delayed period with all the changes going on in the race schedule. So I think that um, not only just the McLarens, but also Charles as well, we can get into him as well. They had a fantastic start to that. They looked really strong on all the different sectors and everything. I think that it was just a really good, encouraging start, especially for all McLaren fans out there. Um, as well, they just looked really quick and efficient. There was not many mistakes that they made, I don't think, on the sprint race at all.
Exactly, Mila, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it was nice to see because obviously they've brought these upgrades now a little bit earlier than Canada, and it just shows that whatever they're doing is working. But I would say that the sprint really showed that they were great in a very short amount of period of time, like with on those tires, it lasted. Whereas I would say that in the race, which we'll talk about later, I would say that maybe they were better on the intermediates than they were on the softs for a longer period of time. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably why I'd say.
Tom, just briefly, what do you make to the sprint?
Yeah, it was good. I think it was nice to see, somebody else on the podium. It's quite encouraging for the rest of the season, seeing McLaren up there. As Mina sort of said, the upgrades that they brought. I think we all expected them to bring upgrades at some point, and I certainly hope that they would be there and thereabouts, and that's encouraging. Didn't think it'd be too long before they were fighting again, given the last few seasons. But yeah, it was refreshing. It was good to see them, back where they have been for the last couple of seasons.
Well, okay, we'll get on to qualifying now because I think the irony was that obviously they did have a strong sprint, but going into Q1, obviously I think Piastri was on the brink in Q1 of qualifying to make it into Q2. So that was kind of ironic, wasn't it, given how strong they were in sprint quali and also the sprint race. So yeah, slightly sketchy opening for them. But the team that had the sketchiest Q1, we have to talk about this, is Aston Martin, who I think I mentioned in the group chat about their qualifying in the sprint. Obviously their F2 car being quicker than their F1 car in I think it was quali for the sprint, wasn't it? But still, enough said about Q1 as well for them, right, Mila?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that as other people are progressing, Aston Martin is unfortunately not progressing as much as they'd like to. But I think we're all aware at the start of the season they're not where they want to be, and I'm not sure when we're going to see that them actually become even slightly competitive in the lower midfield. So, but it's expected, I think. But it's sort of shocking again.
Well, you
So
say the word shocking, Megan. Would it be harsh to say it's embarrassing, or to Mila's point, is it more about, development and they'll be back soon?
Well, I mean, I would say that not to speak too heinously on the team, of course, but like,
Come on.
it is kind of embarrassing a bit because I mean, you started out when Aston Martin first became an F1 team a few years back. They looked really promising, and there's just been no sort of improvement into getting them into those kind of top spots, and especially in the last year and a half with all the changes going around in the team as well. There's just been no sort of improvement, and you would think that they would should start to deliver these results at this time. But they've kind of just been battling it out with the um, with Cadillac in the back of the grid. It's just been quite grim for them. So I'm not sure exactly when we'll see those type of improvements be made, but I mean, something has to change if they want to see any type of point scoring. Because I mean, last year they were, middle of the grid, kind of. It wasn't too bad on them, but it's been no points scored, no sense of improvement, just at the back of the grid.
I was going to ask you, Tom, obviously, Megan just talked there about changes. I mean, there's often been a narrative about, Stroll and his son being one of the drivers, but actually it's Alonso as well that isn't able to perform in this car either, right? Because in qualifying, obviously 18th and 17th. I mean, it not necessarily the driver's fault, you could argue, either driver.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems pretty undrivable. We at the start of the season, we were talking about these sort of vibrations, and both drivers were saying they could only do a certain amount of laps, before they would potentially get some nerve damage. I think we were talking about,
Yeah.
and it seems that that's improved, but the performance of the car, doesn't seem to have improved at all. And so, for both drivers, you're absolutely right. It's not a case of one, we're used to Alonso getting a lot more out of the car. It's just that both are really, really struggling. And yeah, I think we all thought that, with Adrian Newey coming in, in combination with Alonso, that they would build some sort of rocket ship this season. And then it's just been, massively disappointing. And I think, it's shocked the team. They've now made changes. Adrian Newey stepped back. I think they've really not anticipated where they were going to be, and they've had to go straight back to the drawing board. So, I thought we might see some improvements this season, but Megan and Mila are absolutely right. We've seen nothing of the sort so far. So it might be a case of waiting until next season and starting again fresh. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
I think it's a testament, right, to Max Verstappen, who obviously a lot of the second drivers to him always struggled when Newey was the race engineer at Red Bull to show how good he is as a driver, that he can drive any car that supposedly is driverless. So yeah, obviously in Q2 he finished at first at the end of Q2, which was good for him in terms in the short term. In Q2 as well, we also had Lawson, Behrman, Sainz, Ocon, and Albon all struggling to push into Q3, which isn't great, obviously, for them. Alpine though, once again, my favorite new team. Going to try and get a job with Alpine clearly because I keep talking about Colapinto. He is my new favorite driver, and he once again was showing some solid qualifying pace. I just wanted to give him a shout out. It's really nice to see, right, Megan, just how well and sort of solidly he seems to be doing recently.
I know it's been really exciting to see them kind of up in that middle pack of the grid. They kind of ultimately swap places, if you could argue, with Aston Martin this year. But I mean, Colapinto's been performing fabulously so far, so I'm thrilled for him, like you are.
Yeah, it was just the irony, isn't it? Because literally this race last year, I think he crashed out or he had a really poor race and he had a poor season, to be honest. But Alpine did in general. So it is just really nice for them to continue this race pace, and obviously in quality they did really well. The person that is standing out though, doing a fantastic solid job though, we have to talk about Kimi Antonelli, Q3 qualifying again. He's very tidy. For me, he doesn't really do anything extraordinary in the car yet, but he's very young. For you, Tom, though, is it a case of like he just gets the job done, or am I being a bit harsh saying he's a bit ordinary?
It's difficult because I think that qualifying session was a little bit underwhelming in that it didn't look like Kimi had done his best lap and they didn't think he
Yeah.
was going to get pole. But then, in the second stint of Q3, no, basically no one, I think only Max improved. So it was like a little bit underwhelming. So, he got pole, but it wasn't his best lap.
No. Sector three,
So
right? It was the time where he seems to struggle a little bit generally in qualifying,
yeah.
isn't it?
But I think it shows you how quick that Mercedes is, to be honest, that they're not pulling out their best lap and they're still on pole. And he outqualified George by a long way. I mean, I was skeptical going into the season. I kind of thought George was favorite. I thought Kimi wouldn't really. I think he'd be a solid number two driver. I didn't think he would really be there compared to George, but I'm really being proved wrong. I think. I mean, to slightly disagree with you, Robin. I think Kimi's showing that he's got it. I mean, he's quick, and in the race, I mean, we can talk about maybe his starts. He's not yet got to grips with, but it kind of doesn't matter because he's so quick. And Mercedes is so quick that he's getting the overtakes done, and he's won three in a row now. So I think we have to really talk about him seriously as a championship contender this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, actually. I think that I think Kimi's kind of got this the perfect kind of support system around him, in that yeah, he is a young driver, but he's really being nurtured by Toto Wolff. He's sought after him. He's actually shown to build him up as a driver, let him fail, but not put too much pressure on him. And then same with like Bono as his race engineer. Like he's really getting a really great support system,
I was
which
going to
is
say you couldn't get a
yeah.
better person to support him, could you? Obviously, he was obviously Lewis Hamilton's engineer for so many years. So yeah, fantastic to have him in his team, isn't it, for Kimi? I was going to ask you as well, Mila. Verstappen obviously up to second. It's quite pleasing to see that kind of quali pace that was kind of lacking and felt like he was struggling at the start of the season a little bit. It's good to see Verstappen. Well, love or hate him. Some people are going to say they don't really care, but I think it is good for the sport to have Verstappen happy, right? Because there's been a lot of narrative about him wanting to leave or rumors about this. So it's been good to see, isn't it?
It's so great to see Verstappen race and do some really fun things this weekend. And it was just seeing him in Q3 and kind of performing slightly well just shows that the upgrades that they've made on the Red Bull car are also working. I think they've also added a rotating rear wing as well, sort of adding to the Ferrari. So I think it's just Verstappen being happy is, I guess, a thing for the culture of F1, isn't it? But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
so it's more about the racing. But
Well,
yeah,
Megan, as
anyway.
your secret number one fan
Megan
Well,
must be gassed.
you must be
The cat's
delighted
out
to
of
see
the
him
cat's
doing
out of
well
the
in
bag.
qualifying.
But yeah, no, it was really good to see him so back in his kind of race speed and his kind of top race form this weekend overall, and also we'll get into that in the race as well. Quite a lot of chaos, but even in Q3, I mean, Kimi Antonelli finished, I think it was 127.7. I think that was the time, and Max was the only other driver to get into that same time sector as Kimi, so he was obviously just
Yeah.
performing so flawlessly in Q3. So yeah, it was really great to see that.
Well, let's get on to the race. Obviously, we'll start with Verstappen then, because he had quite well. The race was a chaotic start in general, but Verstappen obviously had uh, a bit of a crazy moment where he obviously spun. But I thought it showed the class of the driver to handle that spin, not crash out. I think the expression used by Martin Brundle was like not too much power put in. I was wondering this whether was that him or was it the new regulations, Tom, the power unit, where he was trying to recover positions after that point, but again, I didn't really feel like it was necessarily all his doing. Would that be correct?
Do you mean in terms of
And just in
where
terms of
where
like,
he
was the
finished?
spin really down to him or was it more the car?
I don't know. I think it's difficult to say. I think it's in previous seasons we have seen sometimes when the driver gets on the throttle a little bit too early. Obviously he locked up into the first corner after a good start. And sometimes, I mean, I've never driven an F1 car, so I can't pretend to be an expert. But I think sometimes you've seen when a driver, gets onto the apex, puts the throttle down a little bit too early, it can catch them out and they can spin. So I don't know. I think my interpretation would be a little bit of driver error, just a little bit too keen to stay kind of in the lead or not lose that lead. Um, and I think you have to say like kudos to Max because he caught it so well. I mean,
Yeah.
his race could have been over so easily. The fact that he got out the spin, no one collided with him, and he was sort of just carried on was pretty impressive.
It was like
Um,
Bambi on ice, wasn't it? The way he was able to spin around, but then regain control. It was a ridiculous level of skill, isn't it, that he's got?
yeah, I mean
Mila,
he's
would
a
you
great
agree with
driver.
that in terms of like Verstappen's skill set level? Do you think is the car at fault here, or is it just driver error on this occasion?
I just think it's driver getting used to the car still. I do think it like Tom said, it was a little bit maybe he put a bit too much on the throttle, bit too much power, which made him spin out, and then he had. But he's a very talented driver. I don't. It's probably not the first time Max Verstappen has spun and been able to regain control of the car. It's just, but I think it just made the race whole much more exciting, seeing
Yeah.
everything happening around him, people having to avoid him. I'm finding these race starts really exciting. I think a lot happens right at the beginning. It's really entertaining to see. And so, yeah, that's what I'd say.
I was going to ask you, Megan. Obviously, we spoke earlier about Kimi and his poor starts. It's the only side of the race where he's struggling a bit, isn't it? At the moment, it would seem.
Yeah, start to his race was really poor. I mean, obviously he came into that in P1 and it was, I don't even know if, and you can cut this out, I don't know if it was like a delay on the throttle or what kind of caused for him to just get out of the gate so slowly. But that obviously cost him because I think he dropped down to, I think, wasn't it fifth or sixth?
Yeah, I think he was down to fourth at one point and then had to sort of regain, had that a bit of a battle at the beginning, I think, with Leclerc, right?
Yeah, it
Um,
was. I mean, Charles had a phenomenal go around him to kind of gain that position. But yeah, Kimi just did not have a good start. But obviously, towards the end, he ultimately got his positions back. So, um, yeah, I don't know if it's maybe like we've all talked about throughout the podcast so far is that kind of young driver. It's the anticipation as well, especially with him, the pressure of being in P1 as well. If that got to him, I don't know.
Does
I'm not,
anyone know? Oh, sorry,
sorry, Mila, carry on.
I interrupted you there. Sorry, I was just saying, does anyone know about George Russell's start? Because I wonder if is it a Mercedes problem? Because I remember at the beginning of the season they were both struggling with their starts. So, and I didn't know is it a Mercedes problem or is it just an Antonelli issue? Because it might be that Russell's sorted it now, but I don't know where he sort of was at the
Maybe
beginning.
they've been told to make the races more interesting. They have to have poor starts so that, makes every race a bit more exciting for the fans.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Tom, as well. I mean, I feel like turn 17 was a bit of a big narrative in this race. I mean, obviously, Kimi Antonelli took the inside on Leclerc in lap four, and there was a bit of a narrative on that turn, wasn't there, throughout the race? But yeah, I feel like you could often see it just quickly on Kimi Antonelli, just like that residual power that he's got in the car. That was there to see, wasn't it? Lap four on that turn 17, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we could talk about, the starts and, Ferrari have seemed to have cracked the starts, and Mercedes seem to be struggling, but, you know, over the lap, Mercedes just look so quick. They look quick through the straights, they look quick through the corners, and you can really see the advantage that they have. It was, I mean, just to add, it was the first like 6 laps of the race were just so hectic. Like it felt like if you just watch the highlights, like I was kind of reminding myself of the race, and it felt like the majority of the highlights on YouTube were just the first 6 laps, and
Oh
then the
yeah.
rest of the race sort of happened. It was really good to watch. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think Mercedes are still very dominant, and seeing the advantage you had, as you said, through kind of turn 17 was evident. But I have to caveat by saying that I think Miami, for me, um, you know, gave some sort of glimpse of evidence that I don't think that they will win every single race this season. That sort of was my outcome. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Well, I thought it was nice to see obviously Albon up to P10 after lap two. I forgot to mention that earlier. A driver that is trying to find his way in the Red Bull second driver seat. I spoke earlier about the struggles that the Red Bull second driver seems to have, and unfortunately for Hadjar, he has also found himself in literally in the wall after clipping the wall into turn 14. Megan, do you feel that there is too much pressure on this Red Bull number two driver?
I would say yes. I think, I mean, as we've always discussed, there's kind of that sort of the curse of the second seat Red Bull driver as well. But yeah, it was just really unfortunate. And I think he ultimately clipped the apex and then broke his suspension, which is why he went into that wall. But it was just really disappointing um, to see him out of that race because, I mean, he does perform, he does deliver, he can deliver those results. It's just been, I think, the pressure to kind of keep up with also a veteran like Max, um, who's your teammate. I think that's just also getting to him as well.
I was wondering this, just like dimensions wise, has the cars have got wider this year, or have they got is that correct? Maybe I can delete this from the recording because I was going to ask because it felt a bit like muscle memory where like he would have been in the RB car last year, right? And I wonder whether muscle memory would have played a factor in he thought he had more space than he did on that on turn 14. Because it did look a bit strange, didn't it, Mila? The way he sort of just clipped it. I don't know, it felt a bit odd.
Yeah, he like clipped it and then went. And I don't know where, yeah, like you say, maybe it was like spatial awareness. He thought he had more space than he did, or it was just a silly mistake, and that's why he freaked out like he did. I honestly, I was, yeah, I can see why he was angry because it was a mistake and it took him out of the race. But yeah, it was quite entertaining to see how Joe freaked out a little
Well, someone that seemed to have a bit more of a solid race weekend generally. Obviously, we spoke about McLaren. I thought Lando Norris had a fairly solid race. He seemed a little bit disappointed at the end of the race, which we'll talk about later. But lap six, obviously, he went past Norris, and it felt a little bit like last year, briefly, where Lando was kind of fighting at the top of the for P1. Tom, do you think there's glimmers of hope for Lando's? I'm going to say championship fight because there's so many points to be made up. But has he got a chance, you think, if he can carry on showing this kind of form?
I think there's always a chance. I mean, my mind goes back to 2024 where McLaren didn't have the best start to the season. And by the end of the season they'd sort of turned it around and Lando had a chance to win the championship. So I mean, we are still what only a few races in. So
Yeah.
I think there's always a chance. So much can happen in F1, and McLaren certainly do look quicker and they do look more consistent. So I think they will win races, maybe even. Lando certainly looked quicker than Oscar this weekend. But in terms of whether he has a chance to win the championship, I don't know. I think he's still very much an outsider. I think
Sure.
Mercedes just look really strong, and I would be surprised. But anything can happen. It only takes a couple of mistakes, a couple of DNFs, and it's thrown
Yeah.
wide open again.
Megan, I was going to ask you as well. There's obviously we talk a lot about power degradation at the moment, the new regulations. The Gasly crash in lap 10, which there was a lot happening in this race, but I'll try and bring us back to early in the race. But yeah, lap 10, I was trying to figure out Lawson's, I think it was in turn 17. That didn't look like driver error to me. That looked like a driver who literally couldn't slow down. Do you think that's fair?
I would say yes and no. I think obviously Miami is notoriously known for its high speed corners and everything, but I do think also Lawson did play a bit of a part in that
Okay.
sort of flip. It was just like, it was pure accident, of course, but yeah, I think that's ultimately kind of what caused that. It was really unfortunate though for Pierre as well. But yeah, I think it kind of played half and half, both part into that. You can always disagree, but that was just my take on that.
Mila, what do you think?
I agree. I personally, I think Lawson's done that before. I don't think this is the first time he's done that to someone. Um, I mean, it was shocked that we managed to get him airborne, but
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
do
was
think
quite
it
strange,
was,
wasn't it?
yeah, I do think it was a combination of like driver and maybe he was struggling to stop, but I did look like Gasly. When I was looking on the replay, Gasly gave him a lot of driving space, so he did have space to move. I do just think he just sort of he just didn't do it in time. So I
Yeah.
don't know if it was just reflexes or whatever, but yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Well, we'll move on a little bit later in the race in lap 13 and 14. We had some really clean, fun fighting between Leclerc and Antonelli. Lots of overtaking one another. Antonelli defending his position. Yeah, Tom, I think we've spoken before about clean racing, and Leclerc is the master at being able to fight but not crash into his opponent, right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally I love Charles. I think he's one of my favorite drivers. I think he's very talented. I think he has a mistake or two in him, which I'm sure we can talk about later. But yeah, he's brilliant, and he knows when to kind of cede the place if you like, and then but tactically because knowing that especially with these new regulations, when to kind of let someone get past, and then but knowing that you can get past them. Again, yeah, he's a brilliant driver, and it was quite good to see those sort of that early part of the Grand Prix. I think if you if you're like the FIA, you're probably going, this is what the whole new regulations are about. Everyone's enjoying this, lots of overtakes. People will have their different opinions on that, but that's what I'm imagining sort of their line is. But yeah, Charles is great. His driving style, I would say, is almost polar opposite to Max's. I
Mm.
think in Miami, sorry, Megan, sort of saw some vintage Max in that he was sort of like, I'm coming down, uh, I'm diving into this corner,
Get
you
out
either
of
get
my
on the
way.
line with me or we're crashing.
Yeah.
Whereas Charles, he will spot the gap and he will sort of race fair. So those two are kind of polar opposite. You know where I stand probably on that, but yeah, it was great to see. It was a lovely bit of racing in the early part of the Grand Prix.
I think it just shows Leclerc is class on and off the racetrack, right? I think Lucy did an interview with him, which I'm gonna. Sadly, she wasn't available to come on the podcast, but I think she actually met him the other day, which is really cool. She was at the Miami race herself. But in terms of Ferrari's strategy, I always think that there's always flaws, Megan, with uh, not the driver themselves, but obviously with the race engineers and their strategy. I mean, lap 22, there was that really strange pit stop where Leclerc is heard on the radio saying, "Where is the rain?" And then there was just literally like a very light amount of rain. I feel like the Ferrari strategy really lets them down once again.
I would agree. I think also Ferrari's strategy tends to think almost too far in advance. I don't know if you guys think that as well, but I feel like they almost anticipate too much before it even happens. Because I know it was like later in the race, um, I think it was Alex on commentary got a word from like the South Beach kind of weather people saying, oh, the rain's now just coming in. So I think they kind of anticipate too much and then they end up trying to make these pre-decisions that may help them later and it ultimately just costs them in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with Mila. What do you think to just some strange strategy decisions over the years from Ferrari, right? The one that really springs to mind is I think it was in Canada and Sainz was still driving Ferrari and he was literally racing and then they told him to pit and he was going past the pit lane and he basically told him to shut up. Do you remember that? So
Yeah.
it's kind of lots of examples of I think that engineer is not there anymore actually. I think Hamilton got rid of him. But I just think there's so many examples where they seem to mess up on their strategies, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the way they decide on when they're going to do things because really, when you heard on all the other team radios, they were all sort of saying the similar thing about when they were going to change, when they were going to pit, and when the rain was coming. And it's like Ferrari had a completely different data. So I'm like, where are you getting this from? Yeah, but I think it does come to a point where it looks like the drivers sort of make their own decisions,
Mhm.
and and when it comes to that, there's not something very cohesive as a team.
Yeah.
So yeah,
A couple of
things
slow
to work on.
stops as well. Like
Mm.
didn't help. I think both
No.
Charles and Lewis had a slow stop. And
Yeah.
in F1 we're talking about the finest of margins, seconds, less than. So, when you're fighting for position and it's incredibly difficult and the pressure's so high on these mechanics and they're working together with heavy tires, whatever, it has to be so cohesive. But other teams are able to execute, really, really quick stops. It's what they train for, it's what they practice. And it just seems like Ferrari just, consistently let their drivers down. And that just doesn't help in their race at all.
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
also say, oh, sorry. I would
Carry
also
on,
say
Mila.
McLaren. I would also say McLaren had that as well this weekend with their like Oscar had a really slow pit and that did and also so did Lando, I think, as well. Oh, wait, it was slow. I don't think it was slow as Oscar's, but yeah, they both had slow pits, and that has been a point of contention, especially in last year's championship
Yeah.
fight, I think. So I think McLaren are also a little bit, they're not as consistent with their pits either.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those races where we had a very exciting start, the middle to a point, and then there was a bit of a lull. But I think lap 27, there was a little bit of history, obviously, between Verstappen and Hamilton. But it was quite a strange wide line, Megan, from Hamilton into turn 17. He's done better, though, hasn't he, for Ferrari? Uh, than he did last season, obviously. But I mean, it wasn't much to judge on from last season. But he does seem to be fighting, near the top more than he was last year.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I think obviously we've seen earlier in the season as well when Charles and even Lewis were going kind of head to head in
Yeah.
races, like they're having fun again finally after just a detrimental year last year. Um, I think it's really good as well to see him back onto kind of his more traditional race form, especially because he's, highly deemed as like the best to exist in the sport. Um, I, yeah, I just think he had a better weekend. Ultimately, in the end, like this, we can always discuss later. I think that the Ferraris are kind of one of the losers of the
Yeah.
weekends, which we can get into that later, especially with Charles. But yeah, he performed quite well. Could have done better, I think, but
Yeah.
ultimately for what has been really well.
Yeah. And yeah, as I was saying, there wasn't that much to talk about middle of the race. I mean, lap 35, Piastri got past George Russell, then obviously George retook that position on turn 11 in P5. Lap 39, we had some good fighting again between Kimi and Lando, which is always nice to see. And then I think the big drama, which I think Tom touched on earlier, was obviously lap 55, George Russell versus Max Verstappen. Max holding up George, and then there was contact on that right wing damage. And then obviously George had what, like 2.5 laps left to basically drive a car without his wing being intact. I thought he did really well to, was it he finished in P4, right? He did incredibly well, Tom, to finish that race after that contact.
Yeah, he did. I mean, can't understate it enough when a driver loses part of their front wing. The effect that has on downforce, on aerodynamics is huge, and it really affects the drivability of the car. So, when you're just laps away from finishing the Grand Prix and every position matters, every point matters, particularly when your teammate is about to win and your championship rival, your closest championship rival, every point matters. So he did a really, really good job. There wasn't time to go in and change anything. So yeah, really, really good job. Obviously helped as well by Charles's incident, I think. He was able to take Charles at the end there as well, which I'm sure we can talk about. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, he'll probably be pretty delighted with a P4.
Yeah, well, Mila, I was going to ask you as well. Obviously, Tom's mentioned the Charles Leclerc spin. He did obviously manage to save the car, but that did kind of damage the rest of his race, right? Because I think he did damage his car as a result, and that did obviously affect his performance. But yeah, shame for him. Like we were saying, pretty solid race, even with the strategy things that weren't his fault. A bit of a shame there, wasn't it, with the spin for Charles Leclerc, Mila?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, he got overtaken by Piastri like on the last lap, and then he spun out, and then he got a penalty for it, 20-second penalty after the race.
Yeah.
And and I was like, this is just unfair. And I don't know, maybe it's controversial, but I didn't think that his spin wasn't dangerous. I don't think the car wasn't that damaged. He was able to finish. We were on the final lap. I I didn't
Well,
think it was
how
worth
was it
him
any
pulling
different to
over.
Max's spin? That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah,
Did Max
exactly.
get a penalty? Does anyone
I
know
don't
that?
think he did.
I think it was
If
like,
I might be wrong, but I think he got the penalty for cutting corners, did he not? Because
Oh, was
Right.
it?
basically, because he broke his car and he was nursing his car home, but obviously there was something that he affected his drivability, so he was cutting loads of corners to basically try and get it home, and I think he was given a time penalty for that because obviously you're not supposed to do that. I think
Okay.
that
Okay.
was why. I think so.
Okay, well then
Um,
that makes more sense then. But I just, yeah, it was sad. It's just sad, isn't it? I think just it was a really sad end to a great start for Charles. He was so quick that Sky Sports didn't even realize he was first at the beginning. They thought, and they were like, oh wait, we've got a new race leader, and we didn't even realize. So yeah, I do think it was sad. But hopefully he can continue being pretty consistent and bring it back because I do think he's a brilliant driver, and I do think that the Ferrari is a usable car with or
yeah.
without good strategy.
Megan, did you enjoy the end to that race? Obviously, lap 57, obviously Max Verstappen getting past Charles Leclerc right on the finish line. Yeah, you must have enjoyed that finish.
yeah, I think it was probably good for Max's mentality as well because he hasn't had the strongest season so far. But yeah, I think even just going back to the Charles thing, it was really unfortunate to see him because like spin out like that, because he did have such a strong race overall. The I just think that the penalty wasn't the most deserved, but that's just where I stand on that. But yeah, to bring that up, the stewards ultimately decided that he was in breach of, I think it was Article B186 for cutting the circuit. And they added, hold on, I can bring that up. Um, they added that the fact that he had a mechanical issue of some sort did not amount to a justifiable reason. So
Yeah.
ultimately, 20-second penalty. Terrible.
Yeah, well, not maybe not the race weekend for them. One to forget, and they'll move on to Canada. Kimi Antonelli, obviously, we must talk about him. Obviously, is solid towards the end of this race. Um, First three poles, first three wins. I mean, I think that's first time in history that's happened. Um, so yeah, he's having an incredible season. I mean, maybe I was being slightly unfair to him when I said he was a bit. I didn't mean average, but I just haven't seen enough yet from him. But I think it's one of those things where he's been so consistent. He's not actually been visually on camera enough. So maybe we'll see more of that as we go. But yeah, he's doing remarkably well, isn't he, Tom?
Yeah, he is. I mean, we forget how young he is as well, and he's, not long been in Formula One, so you could kind of forgive him for making mistakes, for not quite, being at his best. I don't think anyone necessarily thought he'd be this consistent, or challenging, in the way that he is doing. So, for his age, for his lack of experience, and let's not forget he didn't exactly go through the F1 categories, F3, F2. He was picked, and he jumped straight into that Mercedes seat. So whatever Toto saw in him, it seems to be playing out exactly as he had hoped. So I think, yeah, we can't underestimate, or overstate or understate that, one of the ones, enough. He's doing really well, and I think he's got a long career ahead of him.
It must be quite frustrating though, right, for George Russell, because I suspect in his brain he probably thought, well, I'm the main man. This 18-year-old, there's no chance he's going to be fighting for a championship. He's too young. And look how well Kimi's doing. So yeah, kudos to him. I also wanted to shout out to my boy Colapinto finishing eighth. Wasn't really seen on TV, but I think it's one of those races where there was a lot of fighting at the top of the field. So often the cameras won't really be picking up much during a live race weekend. But obviously to finish eighth is really impressive. So yeah, another solid race for him, and he'll hopefully have another solid race in Canada. But I wanted to say as well, was there any positives or rather negatives for a team like Williams, obviously Sainz and Albon? Um, the qualifying does need to be improving, doesn't it, Megan?
Yeah, I think they're still kind of in similar places as other teams on the grid where it's
Yeah.
kind of that stalemate sort of sense. They're not really improving. They're kind of just in the middle of the grid essentially. So I'm not really entirely sure what changes they need to improve upon, but it's got to happen quick because we're, heading into mid-season now. Um, so they've kind of got to figure out where they're lacking and how to improve on that before the season continues.
Yeah. Mila, would you say that? I mean, there's quite a lot of midfield teams, or well, I don't want to say midfield, they're sort of like relegation zones, some of these teams at the moment, but there needs to be a lot of improvement for a Cadillac. Obviously, Aston Martin we spoke about earlier. Audi, obviously, Bortoleto car was literally on fire. A lot of those teams are struggling, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say, and as a Williams fan, I would say that I'm a little bit
I forgot
con
this. Sorry, I forgot about
no,
that.
it's okay. I was no, I don't mind. I'm a Williams fan, but I also am a Piastri fan as well. But Piastri just in a bubble. Sorry, McLaren. But yeah, no. So I would say, with Williams, it's quite disappointing. And Sainz was complaining on the, and so was Albon. They both were. And you know what? Complete justified because the whole thing that James Vowles has been building up over the last like what 3 years is everything's gonna change for the 26 regs. We're gonna be a competitive car, and that's how he got signs in the first place. He basically persuaded them that that was going to be the year. And it's not happening right now. And it's
Yeah.
really disappointing because they were showing some promise last year at the end of last season. And it's kind of like, when is it happening? The clock's ticking, and he did make a promise. So
I
yeah.
suppose so. I mean, they are fighting against some of the richest teams in motorsport,
Yeah.
aren't they, unfortunately. So it is going to always, you are competing against essentially money, aren't you? I thought they did well, though. I mean, obviously, Albon finishing in ninth, didn't he? Obviously, started qualifying 15th and obviously signed 13th. So there are some encouraging signs, as Jason Cundy would say. So yeah, I think there is some room for improvement. I
I
think
would,
if they
yeah.
can sort out their qualifying, which has been a bit weak this season, then they might be on something, mightn't they? So we'll wait
Yeah.
and see. But I'll go around the room. Megan, do you have any? They can be unobvious or very obvious. It's up to you. Winners or losers from this race?
Well, I kind of touched on it earlier. Ferrari, I would say in general as a whole, not a bad race, but those mistakes, um, especially with Charles at the end, that ultimately cost them. Lewis also suffering from contact with Colapinto at the
Yeah,
start. Um, he just didn't have the sort of, I guess, the speed to continue that. So that's where he ended up in sixth, I believe.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I would say Isaac Hadjar did not have obviously a good weekend. Same with Pierre. I think they just didn't perform. I would say winners overall for me, besides Kimi, because he just had a flawless weekend. I would say the McLaren's
Yeah,
really up to good form this weekend.
yeah. How about you, Mila? Winners and losers.
I would I would also say for winners, Oscar Piastri is my winner for the weekend because seeing him get P3 really made my day. Honestly did. And I know it was only P3, but can I just say
Yep.
100% podiums when he's driven so far. When he's been in the
Oh, when
car,
he's finished.
100%, yeah, when he's finished, 100% podium finishes. Just saying. So that's some pretty impressive stats, guys. Anyway, uh, but yeah, so for winners for me, yeah, I think similarly for me, losers would be, and I would say the Ferraris are the losers for this
Okay.
weekend because it's sort of showing that they have got some chinks in their armor a bit, and unfortunately Claire had a bad weekend. But yeah, so no, probably be losers, and then Hadjar as well, like Megan said.
Tom,
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with McLaren. I think they are winners. This is going to be a really rogue one. But
go for it.
part of me thinks that Cadillac was slight winners this weekend. Perez
Oh,
just seems
I'm looking at the race result here, Tom, and the 18th and 16th. But anyway, the
just
floor
bear
is
with
yours.
me. But there was moments I can't remember if it was in the race or in the sprint, but Perez just looked a little bit racy. Like he just like they looked like they were competing, albeit
Mm.
right at the back. It
Okay.
was the first time I think I'd seen a Cadillac actually like compete properly and look like they were there for the overtake. So just maybe small improvements for Cadillac. They're still at the back of the grid, but Perez looked like he was actually, an F1 driver, and it wasn't just a bit of a procession to finish the race. So that's my really rogue opinion of the day. I think losers, I would agree. Ferrari, it's frustrating because you think that they're there, and you think that every season you're like, oh, this could be their season, and then first couple of races are good, and then they just start to drop off, and you're like, same old Ferrari. So I really hope it doesn't go that way, but yeah, it wasn't their best weekend, unfortunately. So for me, I think they are the losers.
I think for me, yeah, my winners are. It's just nice to see McLaren up the field and obviously finishing in P2 and P3. I think that does bode well for the season. We need a competitive team to go against Kimi because we need it for the sport. It would worry me if Kimi just ran away with it. I mean, obviously I'm a purist, so I'll watch it anyway. But we need bums on seats, eyes on screens, watching the sport. So yeah, hopefully McLaren can come back and be competitive and stronger like they were last season and give Kimi a bit of a run for his money. My losers are definitely Aston Martin. I was looking at their fastest lap for the race, and both cars are essentially 3 seconds slower for their fastest lap over Kimi Antonelli, the race winner, which is shocking, really, given that, like we were saying earlier, they've got Adrian Newey as their engineer. So something needs to change. I don't know what needs to change. I think maybe less driving in the fancy Aston Martin cars with Adrian Newey and more actual doing his job would be good. I don't know what's going on there. Um, so yeah, that is disappointing for them. And it's such a prestigious, Aston Martin is such a prestigious company and sort of, British sort of icon, isn't it? And you associate with James Bond. This is not James Bond, is it? This is like I was trying to think. It's basically like Johnny English. This is the Johnny English of F1 at the moment. So yeah, not good, and something needs to change, and I hope it does for them. Um, but yeah, we'll see. But next up, we let's preview now Canada. Obviously, we're running a little bit short on time. We'll just go around the room. What do we think will happen there, Megan?
I do believe that Mercedes will probably have a very standout weekend as well. They've been just
They are
delivering
strong
all
there, aren't they?
season.
They're very strong in Canada, aren't they?
Yeah, and then after seeing the kind of race overall this weekend, we kind of had the battle for the top six spots between Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and then Max in and out of those positions. It would be interesting to see. I know you kind of touched on it briefly to see if McLaren could actually give Mercedes a run for their money in Canada. That would be actually, I would like to see some type of competition there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mila, what do you think? Who do you predict will? Oh, sorry, I'll ask you first, Megan. Who do you think will win the Canadian Grand Prix?
guys, I'm gonna have to say Kimmy right now.
Fair enough. Mila, yeah, what do you think will happen in this race?
I swear, because Mercedes are bringing up their upgrades to Canada, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they're just going to be even faster than they were before. So I wonder if that will be an interesting thing where it's like all like a couple of other of the top teams have caught up, and then now suddenly they still can't chase them again. So it might be a bit of that. But yeah, I think Mercedes are going to be dominant. I think it's interesting to see how George Russell performs because he normally quite likes Canada.
Yeah, he won
So
it, didn't
I
he, last
wonder if,
year?
yeah. So I wonder if him and Kimi are going to be battling it out a little bit. Also, I'd like to see some action from the McLarens, but I'd love to see Max Verstappen, be
Yeah.
up there again. And I honestly just think it'd be quite enjoyable. He was really enjoyable to see racing this week, even though he was aggressive because it was classic Max.
I was gonna,
So
sorry, Karen.
yeah. No, no, I'm done. You can go.
Sorry, sorry, Mila. I was just going to say, do we think, Tom, the weather will play a factor? Because, historically we've seen some crazy Canadian Grand Prix where it's literally tipped it down. There's been like buckets of rain, and that's often led to a really fun race. And drivers like Max will really benefit. Obviously, I know Mercedes do quite well in the wets, but it'd be fun to see a chaotic race and maybe see a random race winner, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think Canada's one of my favorite circuits. It's fast, long straights, can be very unforgiving at times, close barriers, and you're absolutely right that weather can definitely play a factor there. Some of the best races I think in F1 history have been at Canada, certainly when there's been some rain. It's a really good way of almost leveling the playing field a little bit when you've got that kind of unpredictable element of weather. So it will be really interesting to see what happens if we get a wet race, a wet qualifying, both potentially. It will be really interesting. It's always a good one. I think
Aston
yeah, I
Martin
think
score some points.
Aston Martin. I think we would have to have some sort of I don't know, unprecedented weather system, maybe sort of like a tsunami or something. I don't know.
DNF for every other car. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But stranger things. I don't know. Stranger things have happened in F1, but you never say never. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think Mercedes are certainly the favourites. There's a good point from Mila there about upgrades. And yeah, George Russell. I think he's kind of got to improve.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if Kimi wins, the pressure's really on. So if you're George Russell, you kind of have to think, yeah, Canada's got to be my weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm hoping for a chaotic race. I'm going to pray to the rain gods that we get buckets of rain and we get a really exciting race. I'm going to go, yeah, I think I'll go with an Antonelli P1. So yeah, just quickly around the room. So Megan, you're saying Antonelli for the win?
Yeah, it's just looking like that right now, isn't it?
Mila?
I'm going to be very good. I'll just say George Russell and be
Go
very,
for it.
give it a go.
Excellent. Well, he won it last, didn't he? So there's every
Yeah.
hope. Tom?
Yeah, I think George Russell as well. I think he's got to.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of our episode. Thank you so much to obviously Megan, Mila, Tom. This is the Championship Lap podcast. We'll be back for our Canadian review. We'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks, guys.